On today's episode of Uncommon Sense, we speak with Father Spencer Howe, the chaplain of the Society of GK Chesterton, about the spirituality of GK Chesterton, the upcoming conference, and the spiritual renewal that you will find there, and how all of this relates to St. Francis of Assisi. All that and more on this episode. Hello and welcome, viewers and listeners, to Uncommon Sense. My name is Joe Grabowski. I am the VP for Evangelization and Mission here at the Society of GK Chesterton. I am joined, as always, by my wonderful co-host, Gretelyn Darkey. Hi, Gretelyn.
Hi there, Joe.
And we are very pleased to welcome to the podcast today our wonderful chaplain, Father Spencer Howe. Father, how are you doing?
I'm great. It's good to see you both today. Great to be with you.
Wonderful. So, Father, maybe just tell the listeners, viewers who may be unfamiliar with you or you're a new face, a little bit of your background, how you got involved with the society and particularly as its chaplain.
Well, I've lived my life in the Twin Cities, and it turns out that's one of the epicenter of a lot of the Chestertonian activities here in the United States. I came to know the Ahlquist family when I was in high school, and had a very pivotal moment in my life where I went on pilgrimage with, at that time, the American Chesterton Society to England in the footsteps of our very own GKC. And it was during that time that I began to ponder in very real ways the possibility of seminary and priesthood. So I've been a priest now 10 years, just celebrated my 10-year anniversary a couple of weeks ago. And I am a pastor in Minneapolis, a beautiful parish called Holy Cross. A very ethnic and wonderful historic community, largely Polish community. And we are very excited about the conference coming back to the Twin Cities this year. It makes the travel a lot easier. So I'm thrilled to be at home here. I also help to host one of the local societies here in Minneapolis. It meets in one of my churches, St. Clement Church. We affectionately call the hall of the church the Old Ship, which is a bit of a reference to the flying in. But it's the place where we gather for our monthly fellowship and book discussions.
Wonderful. Congratulations on your anniversary. That's wonderful.
Yeah, and
time flies when you're serving the Lord. Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, and you mentioned there, Father, local society. My understanding is it's quite a vibrant one there, the one that you run in the Twin Cities. Is that correct? You get a pretty good attendance.
It's getting to be vibrant. We think of ourselves as vibrant. We're growing. We're always meeting new people. We are building some traditions. For many years, there was one Twin Cities society, and then the Great Schism happened almost 2 years ago. And that schism broke us apart. These twain cities shall never meet again. No, we actually meet. We meet twice a year together. We meet for a cookout in the summer with the St. Paul and Minneapolis societies. But we also have been doing a Yuletide feast, a Chestertonian Christmas celebration in December. And there's been some wonderful steps forward. Dale used to host the local society for many, many years as the local czar, the acting czar. And so we're building on those foundations. But now we're able to put a few of our ideas into practice as well, which has been fun to try some new things. And we have a lot of young people in particular. I don't know as much about the St. Paul Society, but the one that meets in Minneapolis. It's been great to see a lot of newcomers to Chesterton, a good number of young adults, and I think a growing reach. We're getting out on social media and beginning to just kind of get the word out that there's good people gathering for fellowship discussion and, of course, the afterglow.
Wonderful. Well, why don't we segue right into the conference? And do you want to tell us about how that's sort of, your big, huge Chesterton Society meeting?
That's going to be our big one. So, of course, we'll take the month of July off from meeting as a local society. That was always a tradition here. Some of the listeners may not be familiar with the fact that the Society conference used to be in the Twin Cities every summer. So it used to be in June, very often around Father's Day. And I'm really excited that it's coming back. It's a very different feel, very different venue. We used to be at the University of St. Thomas, but I'm very excited to kind of get the band back together, as it were, here in the Twin Cities. It's been something I've tried to talk the Society into for a long time, and I'm glad. I don't know if I made any impact, but I'm glad they're coming home. So it's a great way to get more local people to a conference. And so I've certainly been making a lot of invitations, hoping to see a lot of our local participants coming to the conference, getting involved. There are some local speakers as well. So very excited, I think, on the whole, just for what it's going to mean for the Twin Cities community, because I think a conference does really make an impact. Of course, one of the special things about the Twin Cities is the schools community. We have 2 Chesterton academies, and the kind of the flagship school, Chesterton Academy of the Twin Cities, are going to be assisting with hosting the schools network conference as well, the days before our conference in late July. So I think it's going to be a great week, and I'm looking forward to all that it is to come.
Yeah, and one of the things, we get inquiries about here at the Society rather frequently. We have a local societies coordinator, Jessica, who works wonderfully for us in responding to all these and giving advice, but we've heard from many of the people coming to this year's conference that they are interested in starting a local society, and if you, viewer, listener, are in that camp, it really is a great way to not only get energized and determined and steel your determination to do so, to start a local society, but to get some seasoned advice from folks like Father Howe, myself, who have run local societies for or at least been participants in them for many, many years. Gretelin as well. You can do that whether you join digitally, come remotely, so to speak, to the conference, because you can still participate via the app in the community forums and ask questions, but you can also show up in person in Minneapolis in July and pick our brains about what it takes to run a local society, what are some of the strategies, what are some of the pitfalls, learn some of those things, and then listen to the wonderful talks, which will give you plenty of fodder for conversations you can have around the table at your local society once you get it started. So just one more incentive and reason to come and join us at the conference.
So we're gonna dovetail right into the conference. We've got our next text is St. Francis of Assisi, so we're thrilled about that. We just finished a 2-month discussion of the ball and the cross, and it's just really been fun to see people coming alive. A lot of people reading some of this stuff for the first time. It's good to read it for the first time. It's good to go back. They're inexhaustible texts and riches. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Joe and I discussed St. Francis of Assisi on the podcast for a few weeks here, and it was both of us. It wasn't our first time, but oh man, what a wonderful, rich text, and so much to say. And I feel like we could have probably talked for another couple of hours easily. It's highly recommend reading it before the conference.
Indeed, and reading in that group context, this is going to sound odd probably, but it often reminds me of the way Chesterton spoke about babies, in how he appreciated babies, that with each newborn, there's sort of a new universe, right? Because there's a new soul appreciating it, a new mind interacting with it. And in reading these books, every time you have a conversation about it, every time you revisit it yourself, so you can be a very seasoned Chestertonian and have read, orthodoxy a dozen times, and yet then you have a conversation with someone coming to it for the first time, and their fresh, unique insights will open new avenues of thought, new approaches to you. It's just such a wonderful testament to the communion of saints, in a way, of how we commune together around goodness, truth, and beauty.
Amen. Well said.
Truly.
Well, on the subject of goodness, truth, and beauty, that's what we will be discussing, certainly at this year's conference, focusing on that great figure of St. Francis of Assisi, but also Chesterton as in his own way, a mighty spiritual figure with a certain kind of spiritual insight to provide. And I know that you'll be addressing that, Father, at the conference in your breakout session, and certainly it also comes up frequently at the liturgies and the homilies and throughout really the weekend in discussions. But without any spoilers at all, maybe just give us a couple of insights into why Chesterton is a valuable model for our day and age, especially for lay spirituality, and maybe how he also takes up that mantle of St. Francis of Assisi in certain ways in his spirituality as well.
Yeah, it's a broad question, but I think a very good one to kind of whet our appetite. And I'm excited just thinking about it. I also have to admit that I'm still working on my talk, and but I'm very excited to be invited to give one of the breakout sessions. There's so much that could be said about Chesterton, but I think one that comes to mind, a point of contact between Chesterton and Francis, is that they both prayed with their eyes open, and this kind of vision of the created order and understanding that they saw the Creator. This is actually an insight that Chesterton has about Thomas. He says that we could name Thomas of the Creator, but there's this beautiful sense in which, and there is a kinship between Francis and Thomas, but in a beautiful way, Chesterton has that kind of contact with the created order. He delights in everything that is. He delights in all that has come forth from God, and he also is profoundly in solidarity with it. And I think Francis, the text on Francis, but I think the spirit of Francis and the figure of Francis is one who really knows that he is in the creation and he's together with the created order. And that whole conversation that Chesterton has about the canticle of the sun, and discovering that all of these other creatures share one thing with us. They share a common Father. And that he's very insightful to say that nature is not above us as a mother, but next to us as a brother and a sister. And this idea of being able to look out upon the created order, not only to gaze out at nature, but kind of in that fuller sense to live in the world and to live in a fully human way in that world. And I think Chesterton so often was one of those ones who prayed with his eyes open. He allowed his senses to help him to know God. There was a real via positiva in his vision, that he could come to know God through these signs of God, what Augustine would call the vestigia Dei, the fingerprints of God left over all the creation. So uniquely, the human person is made in the image and likeness of God, and so uniquely a human person can see the lesser created order, the animal world, the plant world, the natural physical world, the universe, and begin to see signs of the Creator. So I think it's a wonderful thing. Very often, St. Francis becomes kind of undersold as a preacher to the birds, as a man who would be happy with the birds nesting in his beard. But I think there's something much fuller which has to do with this relationship with the Creator. And Chesterton was a man who knew that if there was thanks to give, there had to be someone to give those thanks to. And so the whole spirit of Chesterton's life was in receiving creation as a gift and living as a gift back to the Creator.
We talked a lot, Joe, when we were talking about the book, about St. Francis as sort of like a violent lover. He was just sort of like violently in love with Christ, and that could explain all of his actions, sort of all these sort of crazy things that he did. Well, if you see someone in love and they're doing crazy things, you're just like, oh, well, they're in love. So yeah, it's just this beautiful that Francis was able to love God through his creation, and sort of just be wildly in love. It's just a beautiful insight that we were able to draw as well.
Yeah, and it's really important to know that Chesterton doesn't stop at that first stage, because I think he's also very willing to follow Francis to Laverna and to the stigma, to the experience of the stigmata and being crucified to this world. And there's a deep mysticism in Francis, of course. Francis uniquely was the sort of saint that people looked at him and said, "There's Christ. There's Christ again in the flesh." And there's the amazing Franciscan movement that really just began as a response to this man who imitated Christ in a very explicit and dramatic way, a kind of a wild and reckless way. That brought him to the cross, and it brought him to that experience of the stigmata. There is a beautiful stained glass window that was given by the Chestertons, and it is in the parish church. Joe might remember it from our visit to Beaconsfield, but it is the Christ, the crucified Christ, with the seraphim surrounding him, and Francis below receiving those wounds. And it's a beautiful window that no doubt Chesterton had pondered that kind of hidden reality, that hidden experience that Francis had. But I love the chapter that follows him to that point of being really configured through the crucified.
Beautiful.
Yeah, another insight that really strikes me from both Chesterton and the witness of St. Francis, but particularly Chesterton writing about St. Francis in this book, is this notion of how receiving creation as a gift is so important as a gift from a creator, because otherwise nature becomes a tyrant. Otherwise nature becomes something fearsome and terrible. And when it is Mother Nature rather than sister brother on that peer level with us. And I just think so much of today, how we have, whether it's ecological fear-mongering about sort of just doubt in the goodness of the bounty of God and his wonderful creation, which if you love creation in the proper way and in a properly ordered way, you treat it and steward it well. So I'm not saying there isn't a proper ecology, but even now with the human nature, that our own nature is causing for many people, sadly, so much confusion, evidently, about what kind of creature they are in the most fundamental sense, male or female, for example. And that reminds me, too, of the insight of the Church, Vatican II, that without God, the creature man himself becomes unintelligible. So just such wonderful insights. And yeah, Father, any thoughts on kind of that angle of approach that Chesterton takes to Francis?
I think it's absolutely right that, kind of a true anthropology grounded in the incarnation and grounded in the idea of a creator that would spare no expense, that would come down to us. And one of the things that marks Francis's life, of course, is the delight in the Christmas mystery. And I had a very, very significant early experience of retreat in my years. I studied in Rome at the North American College, and one of the traditions was to have a first-year retreat in the city of Greccio. And Greccio is the place where the Nativity was reenacted at the midnight mass. And so such a beautiful kind of realism. The Franciscans have been known in art history and in history more broadly, spiritual history, to really focus on the realism, whether it's the Stations of the Cross, which were championed by the Franciscans, or if it's the nativity scene itself. But these are great ways that Francis's kind of delight in these mysteries of what the incarnate, the kind of shaking reality of the incarnation, that really does reveal the mystery of the human person in a new way. So I think, I'm not sure if that's a direct answer, but I think it's a really neat feature of Franciscanism and the Franciscan spirit that it's so grounded in those really, really key mysteries: the incarnation, the redemption, the crucifixion, the realism of what Christ carried in carrying the cross.
Which makes sense because, Francis's whole life was, after he converted, really, was about living the gospel in a very radical and concrete way that probably most of us would completely balk at. But yeah, it's just this beautiful taking Christ at his word and trying to embody that incarnation in such a very concrete and moving and beautiful way.
I might, if there was time, just add a word about the title of my little presentation that I'll offer. And it's meant to be a play. So the title that I gave was Assisi Upside Down, Chesterton and the Life of Faith. So it's meant to be a little play on a film that was made, a book as well, Assisi Underground. And it tells the story of some of the heroism that went on in the 1940s to hide Jews and to really fight the Nazi movement. And it was an amazing story that I'm not really going to directly speak of, other than just take a clever name and turn it upside down. So Assisi Underground is nice, but Assisi Upside Down is a really evocative image. When Chesterton talks about Francis's discovery, looking back at Assisi standing on his head, he begins to see how the things that seemed to be there by necessity were all hanging in independence. And I think that is perhaps the main focus that I'm going to take, is how Chesterton understood the gift of dependence on God. the gift of the dependence of the created order, the contingency of being, all of the different things that we might say that we find when we see that the world isn't just the way it is, but the world might have been different, but now it is the way that it is. And that says something about what God desires. And I think that image of a man standing on his head, but seeing things more truly than they would have been if he was standing upright, there's no more Chestertonian image than that. So I'm not creating anything new. I'm just riffing on a wonderful image that Chesterton uses in that particular text, but really throughout Chesterton's writings. There's this image of seeing things for the first time.
Well, I think here is a good time to take a little break, and we're going to have a little ad for the conference, and we'll be right back after that. UncommonSense would like to thank the sponsors of the 42nd Annual Chesterton Conference, including Word on Fire Catholic Ministries. Word on Fire is a non-profit global media apostolate supporting the work of Bishop Robert Barron to reach millions of people and draw them into or back to the Catholic faith at wordonfire.org. Franciscan University of Steubenville. Franciscan University educates, evangelizes, and sends forth joyful disciples empowered by the Holy Spirit. Learn more at franciscan.edu. Belmont Abbey College. Their mission is to educate students in the liberal arts and sciences so that all things may glorify God. Learn more at belmontabbeycollege.edu. And finally, Benedictine College, a Catholic Benedictine liberal arts residential college educating men and women within a community of faith and scholarship at benedictine.edu. Thank you to all the sponsors and vendors that are participating in the 42nd Annual Chesterton Conference. To learn more about them or to greet them in person by coming to the conference, go to chesterton.org/conference. And now back to Uncommon Sense.
Welcome back to Uncommon Sense, the official podcast of the Society of Gilbert Keith Chesterton. Just a reminder, I am Gretelyn Darkey. I'm here with Joe Grabowski, and we are joined today with Father Spencer Howe, the chaplain of the Society. So let's continue our lovely discussion here. And if you don't mind, Father, I'd love to take things in a more conference direct direction. Specifically, as you are our chaplain, if we can talk a little bit about the almost retreat-like nature that these conferences tend to be. I know we have opportunities for Mass and confession every day, Rosary every day. This year we're very blessed to have at our opening Mass, Bishop Barron will be celebrating that. Anything you want to say specifically about just how it feels to sort of be on this Chesterton retreat?
I mean, it's just a tremendous thing, and I think this has become a real feature of the conference in more recent years. Certainly, I remember years ago, the Masses that were part of conferences, always the closing Mass and some of the prayer that was there. But I think there's been an increasing desire for that on the part of the participants, and certainly as the society itself has found a greater kind of charism and an understanding of being a spiritual movement, a holy campaign. And so I think there's certainly something for everyone there. The worship is very beautiful, and we do transform a hotel space into a place that we can really pray and praise God. So I think care for the music and care for the setting up of the Masses. It's a very, very special thing to be a part of. And in these recent years, it's been so much fun to see people responding. Of course, many Catholics are in attendance, but there are many who are very unfamiliar with the Mass or curious, but unacquainted, maybe. But it's a wonderful environment in which they begin to ask questions, and we certainly invite any of the conference participants to come to be with us to pray and to make yourselves at home in that sense, and obviously to ask questions. And that's a wonderful thing that we look forward to each year. Every year, we also find that there are some in our midst who are kind of ebullient in the newness of their faith, because every year there are some who have even just recently in these last weeks and months been received into the church. So that kind of spirit of joy and delight in having a home in the church, this is something very much on display every year. Every year I meet new converts, and it's a delight as well. So The masses are wonderful. We're going to have some showcasing of some of the music from Chesterton Academy of the Twin Cities. It's always been kind of a mark of the conference to bring some music. We also have the chanted night prayer, which is kind of the capstone of each day of the conference, which is a wonderful way to conclude the night and then transition into the afterglow. I've come to be kind of the cantor for those and really enjoy being a part of those night prayer sessions. But we'll have a number of priests with us throughout the conference, hearing confessions, preaching the masses, and it's a great joy. If any of the listeners are priests who plan to be at the conference, we'd love to have you join us as well. Just get in touch with the society, and we'll be happy to have you with us in those days. But I'm going to be kind of helping to coordinate the liturgies. Very excited about Bishop Barron's presence. We have had bishops before. We've even had cardinals. We've never yet had a pope, but that might change. So, but it's a great thing. And we're very much looking forward to Bishop Barron, who is the keynote speaker together with Dale Ahlquist on that Thursday evening as the conference begins. But he's going to preach the Mass as well as we get the official society conference underway. We also have a local bishop who's going to be with us for the schools network, Bishop Michael Eisen, the newest bishop in the Twin Cities. He's our auxiliary bishop, and he's going to offer a Mass within the schools network, which will be a wonderful joy as well. I'll be offering the closing Mass, which will come before the banquet, the closing banquet, and I promise not to preach for as long as I did last year.
Most of us were okay with it. My son, my 5-year-old, was a little bit, but that's not your fault.
I didn't have, so in my church, I have a little clock that I can look at, but I didn't have that in the conference. So that was a problem.
Wow. I mean, it depends on what you mean by problem. I don't know. We really enjoy your homilies. So thank you, Father.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Yeah, we're always blessed, and it was fun for me last year. I hadn't been to a conference in a while, and it's sort of become more Catholic since I had come to see the number of priests who had come to their vocation through Chesterton was really neat. And yeah, just the beauty of being able to pull someone aside for confession, and it's wonderful. And like Father said, if you're not Catholic and you're interested, it's a very safe space. There's a lot of converts there too, so like no one's going to judge you if you sit or stand at the wrong time. But yeah, it's a really kind of a beautiful place to explore, to rediscover, to reinvigorate your faith. So consider coming for that alone.
Yeah, I've as a longtime conference attendee, I've watched it over the years, and in a very fitting way, right? A century hence, from the timeline of Chesterton's life, we kind of followed that trajectory. I think you could arguably say that now, with last year, we've fully arrived at that full sort of Catholic tilt to our conference right on the 100th anniversary of Chesterton finally becoming Catholic. So sort of as a century earlier, Chesterton himself had plotted toward conversion to Catholicism approaching 1922. So the conference in these latter years has slowly over the years since the mid-teens kind of become more and more Catholic. And now I would say, from my own perspective, the liturgy, the beauty of prayer at the conference, it's not added on, it's not extra. It's become intrinsic in this very important way, because it's quintessentially Chestertonian, that Chesterton in all his writing, like Francis, points beyond himself. He points to the other. He leads us. That he himself never wanted to be the focus of attention. He wanted us to focus our minds on the things that are higher. And so Mass really has become, in many ways, truly, obviously, the high point of the conference, because it is the highest kind of action that we can undertake here. But also, it's just that tapping into, as universal as Chesterton is, and he brings all these wonderful people together, which you certainly see at the conference, all sorts of personalities coming together. Well, if you think that is universal in a way, wait till you see the Catholic Church, right? As I think it was Flannery Connor said, Catholic Church is, here comes everybody, right? that's the true universalism that Chesterton sought and eventually found. And so it really has become a very dear thing to me about the conference that I wouldn't miss for the world.
Yeah, my husband and I were we saw a fellow Chesterton friend at Mass Sunday, and we were talking about something, and Jeremy was like, "You talk about that in public? Like, whoa!" And it wasn't anything bad. It was just something a little bit personal. And then we were both like, "Well, Chesterton people are kind of special. Like you can talk to your Chesterton friends about just about anything, and we understand each other." So yeah, it's
Going back to the image of the retreat, I think it's a really interesting model for thinking about the conference, because I think a retreat is only as good as what happens afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
If you live a retreat and it's wonderful and delightful and insightful and restful and all of those things, but then you just go back to your normal life. So I think that piece of, we really want these to be moments of conversion indeed and insight, but to change our lives and to change the way that we live and to become more and more followers of our Lord, but Chestertonian in the very fiber of who we are. And I think we have a lot of signs of that. I know each year there are people who come to the conference sharing stories about how their lives have been, that they're doing things like what Chesterton was doing. They're imitating Chesterton. They're following in this path. And that's an exciting thing. And we really hope that kind of conversion engine, that kind of shift can take place in the lives of many who are going to be coming this year to the conference.
Mm-hmm.
I do usually tell people, be careful, because you're not going to come back the same. It will change
You'll
you.
also come back with a lot more books.
Yes.
So make sure to pack space in your suitcase.
Yeah, one way or another, conversion, the ongoing conversion in the life of every Christian to be more and more conformed to Christ is going to be something that you come away from that conference with. And so, just to allay any misapprehensions some of our listeners and viewers might have, we're not going to be signing you up when you come. Don't worry, we're not going to have. I mean, if you need it,
unless you want to.
Yeah, if you need it, maybe we can round up some chrism somewhere. But no, we're not going to be converting people right there on the spot. But it is one of those great things about just the truth. Again, goodness, truth, and beauty through witnesses like Francis, through witnesses like Chesterton, and indeed through witnesses like your own fellow Chestertonians. One of the things that I love to come to this conference about is I just learn things about myself, ways that I can become better in my own prayer life, in my own reading of Chesterton, in my own walking the way of faith in the world, because you meet all these wonderful people who are all doing it in such unique ways. People as different as, one of our recent interviewees on the podcast, Susan Sucher, who, here I am, a 40-year-old single bachelor man, and there she is. I don't know how old, probably 27 or so. Yeah. But, mother of 9 and just totally different approaches, but all of us trying to find that way, trying to find our way to be followers, faithful followers of Christ. So.
But that just goes back to what you said earlier, though, Joe, is that there's all different types. So you will find someone there who will be able to open your eyes in a way that you've never had them before. So It's special. It's very special.
And many times it's the speakers, but many times it's the one sitting next to you in the audience. And that's a wonderful thing. It really is a gathering of very odd but very ordinary people.
Yes.
Because we're all odd.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Well, any final thoughts, Father, on just make the hard sell for the viewers and listeners about why they should in some way participate? Again, we know that travel can be difficult, especially at this time of year in summer when other vacations and things are going on. But we do have that digital option, which you can do from the comfort of your own home.
Or your local society.
You'll have access to the community forum in the whole time leading up to the conference from the time that you sign up. And then access to the sessions and the talks, the Q&As, ability to interact with the fellow audience members and even speakers in the app for weeks after the conference. But why, Father, should they in some way find a way to be a part of this?
I mean, I have it on good authority. It's going to be the best conference ever. That, in some ways, it always is, because every conference is irrepeatable. This one is going to be special. We're 100 years out from Chesterton's great St. Francis of Assisi. And I just think in so many ways, God is doing beautiful things in this society. The Schools Network is just one example of the amazing reach into lives and hearts. That is a global reach. This is a global movement. We will have people from overseas that are in attendance, and I really just think you don't want to miss it. I'm going to set everything aside that I have to do as a busy priest that week so that I can be present, not only to the conference, but to the people who are there. And I think you should come as well. We'd love to see you. Do not believe what you hear about Minnesota in the summer. The state bird is not the mosquito, it's the loon. And Minnesota is a rather nice place to visit in the summer. So please come, and I'll look forward to seeing you, not only at the liturgies, not only at my breakout session, but at the afterglows as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Father. It's been a blast talking to you.
You're welcome. Mm-hmm. You're most welcome.
And Gretelyn, thank you once again.
Thank you, Joe.
And to all of you tuning in, whether it's on video or just listening, we ask you to please like, subscribe, give us a good rating and a review, and share this content with your friends. There may be people out there who can benefit from the kinds of programming that we're trying to assemble here at UncommonSense. So please do make sure to direct others to the podcast. We're trying to grow this network. We're trying to invite more and more people into learning about Chesterton, and through him learning about the everlasting man, Jesus Christ. And so whatever you can do to help us would be greatly appreciated, because as we know, Chesterton is always better with friends. Until next time, God bless.